They came for the sky first. That was their mistake. The first time I saw a Vraxan warship, I was sitting in a rusted cockpit above a fractured Earth, eating a cold protein bar with shaky fingers and dried blood on my knuckles. The kind of blood that wasn't mine. It was supposed to be a patrol, routine, quiet, fly the ashfall perimeter, scan for anomalies, come home before sundown to the underground bunkers where the last real humans huddled like rats beneath the crust. But instead, the sky opened, and I watched a piece of God's own rage tear through the clouds in a thunderless silence. I didn't know it then, but I was looking at the Ardent Blade, a Vraxan Skydagger-class cruiser, longer than Manhattan, sleek like a predator, and painted with the red glow scars of plasma bombardment. It didn't fly. It hung there, suspended like a judgment, just above the horizon. We had a phrase for that kind of moment. Ashfall Protocol. When something that wasn't human enters low orbit without permission, you don't radio, you don't retreat, you don't even breathe. You attack. The Ashfall program wasn't supposed to exist. It was scrap tech, jury-rigged fighters from the last real war, bolted with alien Thrasher cannons and fusion boosters repurposed from mining rigs. No shields, no AI, just metal, fire, and whatever piece of your soul you were willing to burn for Earth. I was flying an S-93 Reaper, third-generation atmospheric warbird. No auto-stabilizers, no safety net, just a cockpit, wings, and a god-killer railgun bolted to the spine. We called her Witchfire, and on that day, she became a legend. Command, this is Valkyrie 1. I said into the cracked headset. We've got contact, class unknown, holding low orbit above grid sector Echo 7, requesting permission to engage. There was static, always was. Most of our satellites were dust, and the comm towers still standing were barely hanging on with duct tape and prayer. The reply came cold, gravel-voiced. Admiral Drexel, Valkyrie 1, this is Ashfall Command. Protocol confirmed. You're cleared to engage. My hands went still for a second. Roan, Drexel added, voice low, knowing. Give him hell. I pulled my flight mask down and locked my jaw. Copy that, sir. Delivering hell. Altitude dropped. Wind peeled across the wings like a scream. I nosed Witchfire into the airstream and kicked the booster. The sky turned to fire. You don't really think during an ashfall run. You become. You stop being a pilot and start being a blade. An arrow. A burning will hurled into the dark. The Vraxan cruiser didn't move, just hovered, arrogant and still. Its underbelly was crawling with pulse cannons, kinetic arrays, and hangar bays that hadn't opened yet. They didn't expect resistance. But that was Earth's trick. We never give up the first hit. The railgun snapped awake behind me, thrumming like a living heart. Manual targeting, no autolock, just a human eye, a crosshair, and a single breath. Witchfire, target lock acquired. Charging. I counted the seconds, felt the pressure shift in my chest as the gun core lit up, swallowing power from the reactor. The cockpit lights flickered. The world narrowed to one point, the weakest curve in their hull, where two plates met at a maintenance ring. One shot. That's all we had. I fired. The blast didn't make a sound. It just was. A lance of blue-white death tore from my spine and crossed the sky in less than a heartbeat. It hit them dead center, and the Ardent Blade, that floating temple of alien supremacy, shuddered. Not much, just a flinch. But I saw it. I felt it. The rail round had punched a hole straight through its side, through alloy and flesh tech I didn't understand, through reactors that glowed like suns and cables that pulsed like veins. A gout of purple flame bled from its wound. Then the screaming started. They deployed drones. Fast, ugly things with wings like knives and eyes like wasps. A dozen, then 50, then more than I could count. The sky turned to a swirling black storm of metal, and I dove in. Missile lock, flares, bank left. Gunfire stitched the air behind me, tracers chasing vapor. I spun Witchfire through clouds of enemy fire, flipping through thermal blind spots and dragging death behind me like a comet. One drone clipped my wing. The alarm shrieked in my ear. I flipped the override, dumped velocity, and corkscrewed into a dive, so tight I nearly blacked out. My vision went gray at the edges. Blood hammered in my ears. My body screamed, but I pulled it off. Two drones collided trying to follow. Fire blossomed. Still here. Assholes, I muttered, jerking Witchfire back into a climb. That's the thing about us. We're not stronger. We're not faster. We're not smarter than the Vraxans. but were something they never could be. Desperate. Desperation makes a man bite when cornered. Makes him throw stones at tanks, charge bunkers with knives. Makes him take an old aircraft, tape a rail gun to it, and fly it headfirst into an alien godship because retreat stopped being an option 3 wars ago. That's why we win. Because we have to. I looped back around. The blade was listing now, sagging toward the stratosphere like a wounded beast. Fires were spreading across its spine, leaking violet smoke into the upper clouds. A voice crackled over the comm. Valkyrie 1, Roan, get the hell out of there. You've done enough. Pull back. But I didn't answer, because I could see the reactor core exposed now, barely shielded. A second shot would cripple it, would end it. I leveled out. Witch fire, charged the rail. Power dropped. Systems flickered. Alarms wailed. She wasn't built for 2 shots. Neither was I. I didn't care. This time, I didn't aim. I just felt it. Let the fire in my gut guide the trigger. Let all the rage, the grief, the bone-deep fear of watching Earth become a graveyard boil into my finger. I fired. The shot struck the blade's core, and for one breathless second, the sky caught fire. It wasn't an explosion. It was a tearing, like the heavens were split open and something holy, something forbidden, was screaming its way through the atmosphere. Light poured from the blade, swallowing the clouds, the sky, the world. And then it fell. The Vraxan cruiser broke apart above Earth like a dying star. Chunks rained from the sky, trailing flame and debris. One piece landed in the ocean, another in the Rockies. The biggest fragment hit outside New Cairo. They said you could see the flash from orbit. I don't remember landing. I don't remember crashing, either. Just waking up, half buried in dirt, cockpit shattered, suit torn. My ribs felt like broken glass. Witchfire was gone, just smoke and steel and a crater. But I was alive, and when I looked up, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. Stars. Real stars. Not hidden by smoke. Not buried under ash or pollution or the haze of war. Just stars, like they were watching. I limped toward the burning horizon, blood in my mouth and ash in my lungs. And I realized something. This was just the beginning. We'd drawn blood, and now they'd come hunting. Let them, because Earth doesn't kneel. We rise, through fire, through ruin, through crimson skies. You never forget the first time you set foot on a dead world, especially when the dead don't stay buried. Mars wasn't red when we landed. That's the first lie they always tell you. The postcards, the simulations, the propaganda, they all paint it crimson, glorious, like a battlefield blessed by fire. But when I cracked open the dropship hatch and stepped into the wind, I saw nothing but a pale, sickly rust, like dried blood left too long in the sun. We weren't supposed to be there. Not really. Olympus Mons had been off-limits since the early days of the war. Too unstable, too deep in Vraxan territory. But Command sent us anyway. Recon, they called it. Intel retrieval. Translation? Suicide with a noble-sounding name. There were 6 of us. By the time the sun dipped beneath the Martian horizon, there were 2. The moment our boots hit dust, we knew something was wrong. The air was too still, even for Mars. No storms, no static, no pressure shifts. Just a silence that wrapped around you like a vacuum-sealed coffin. I led the unit, Squad Orpheus. Don't get romantic. Command named us after corpses. Half of us were on our 3rd or 4th combat deployment. The rest had that green, twitchy look, like they'd only ever seen war through a screen. Riley was one of the young ones. Fresh-faced, fast trigger, always grinning like the world hadn't burned yet. He was the first to die. We were sweeping the foothills of Olympus Mons, looking for the remains of an old science outpost, a relic from the terraforming years. Supposedly, it had a data core buried beneath the regolith, something Command thought might give us an edge. Instead, we found them. They didn't come from the sky this time. They came from below. I still remember the sound. Not a roar, not a scream. It was like the Martian rock itself shivered. And then the ground cracked, and the Vraxan biomex came crawling out like ants from a broken nest. You ever see one of those up close? They're not machines. Not really. They're grown, tall as wolves, spines like razors, legs bent backward, like someone rewrote the rules of evolution just to make sure they'd haunt your nightmares. And their faces, if you can call them that, are just empty sockets glowing with cold, green fire. We fought like hell. Riley barely had time to shout before they dragged him down. By the time I got to this position, there was nothing left but a trail of blood leading into the earth. The others wanted to pull back. I didn't blame them, but something in me refused. Maybe it was rage, maybe guilt, or maybe I just didn't want to let Mars win. We pressed forward, deeper into the foothills, past broken satellites and half-buried solar farms choked in red sand, until we found it. The outpost, a low, half-collapsed dome, bones of steel poking out from the sand like ribs, and beneath it, an elevator shaft, still sealed, still powered. "Roan," Vega said, voice tight over comms. "You really think there's something down there worth dying for?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing for certain. The Vraxans were afraid of it. The shaft took us straight down into the ancient bedrock. Lights flickered. Dust clung to our suits. The air grew colder, thicker, like the mountain itself didn't want us here. And then the door opened. What we saw wasn't a lab. It was a tomb. Rows of containment chambers lined the walls. Broken glass, scorch marks, strange, dark stains that hadn't come from paint or rust. I could smell the old fear still clinging to the walls. The kind that doesn't fade, not even after decades. Vega cracked a glow rod. The green light shimmered off a data panel near the center console. I wiped the dust away with a gloved hand. Project Psylocke. I didn't know what it meant then, but I do now. We started downloading what we could. The files were corrupted, fragmented, but the few that remained painted a picture that made my blood freeze. The scientists here hadn't been working on weapons. They'd been studying the Vraxans. Before the war even began, years before the first ship entered orbit, before Earth even knew what was coming, the outpost had captured something alive, and they'd tried to understand it, tried to talk to it. The logs didn't say how it ended, but the scorched walls and sealed doors told me all I needed to know. Something had broken free. "Roan," Vega whispered, "do you hear that?" At first, I didn't. Just the soft hum of the machinery and the distant wheeze of our breath. Then I heard it. Whispers, not words, not sounds. More like thoughts, slipping through cracks in my mind. Familiar, but wrong. Like remembering a song that never existed. I turned toward one of the broken chambers. Inside was a body. Human, or at least, it used to be. I stepped closer, heart thundering. The body was fused to the containment walls. Nerve endings stretched like wires, flesh threaded with metal, and on what remained of the man's chest, a name was etched into the armor. Lieutenant Commander Elias Kale. I knew that name. He'd been my mentor, my CO during training. And now here he was, wired into an alien experiment, still breathing. Barely. "Kale." I croaked through the helmet mic. "Can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, but what looked at me wasn't fully him. It was more or less. "I warned them," he whispered, voice like dry wind over glass. "Told them what the Vraxans were building. Told them Olympus was the beginning." I stepped closer. "What are they building?" His eyes fixed on mine. The green glow of something ancient flickered behind them. A door. Then the ground shook again. But this time, it wasn't Biomex. It was something worse. Vega grabbed my arm. "Roan, we need to go. Now." I didn't argue. We snatched what data we could, set the charges, and hauled us back up the shaft. The air grew heavier, like the mountain was mourning, or warning. We breached the surface just as the sky started to dim. Dust clouds swirled. The wind was screaming now, and in the distance, atop the silhouette of Olympus Mons, I saw it. A shape, something impossibly tall, cloaked in shadow, watching, waiting. We made it back to the extraction point with seconds to spare. Our evac shuttle cut through the storm and pulled us out of hell. Only Vega and I remained. I never told Command about Kale. Not fully. Just enough to keep the ghosts buried. But the files, the ones we recovered, they told me the truth. Olympus Mons wasn't just a volcano. It was a signal tower, a beacon. And now, it was active again. Back on Earth, they called our mission a success. Medals were handed out. Press releases were polished. Smiles were faked for the cameras. But I knew better, because I'd looked into the eye of something older than our wars, older than our species, and I'd seen the future, not in fire, not in invasion, but in silence, in a door waiting to open, and something behind it whispering, "Come home." You don't know fear until you see your own sky turned inside out, and you don't know courage until you fly into it anyway. They called it the Hollow Sky Offensive. Sounds clean, right? Strategic, surgical, but that's not what it was. Not even close. It was a last-ditch scream. A Hail Mary with afterburners and war drums. A bunch of half-broken fighter pilots, patchwork fleets, and orbital debris masquerading as ships. And all of it aimed at one thing. The hives. Imagine the worst infection you've ever seen. Now scale it up until it wraps the Earth like a noose. That's what they looked like. Massive, obsidian-colored Vraxan hives, each the size of Manhattan, just hanging there in low orbit. Dozens of them, connected like tumors across the sky. They were spitting out drones nonstop. Night never came anymore. Just a sick, humming glow above the atmosphere that made the stars disappear. And if we didn't burn them soon, there wouldn't be anything left of Earth worth saving. Command wanted a multi-wave assault. Coordinated, clean, predictable. I told them we'd be dead before the first wave made it halfway. So I offered something else. Something stupid. Surprise. The plan was simple. Not smart. Not safe. Just simple. I'd take Valkyrie's squadron and first break the wall, draw the fire, distract the swarm long enough for the heavy cruisers to punch through the inner shell. And then, once inside the hive, I'd do what I always do. Light a match and hope the explosion's big enough. We launched from the Stratos cradle at 0400, high-altitude catapult system, barely hanging on with spit and duct tape. There was frost on the wings. My helmet was fogging, which fire had been rebuilt since Mars. She still hissed when the reactor warmed, like she remembered the pain. I whispered to her like always, "One more time, girl. Just one more." She didn't answer, but she roared when I kicked her into the sky. The climb through the upper stratosphere was like pushing a knife through molasses. Every second, gravity clawed at our wings. And above us, the hollow sky. It looked wrong, not just alien wrong. Like the heavens had been skinned and something oily and mechanical was leaking through the wound. The hives were arranged in geometric patterns, spirals, fractals, some kind of language we never cracked. And in the middle of the pattern, the biggest one pulsed. Hive Theta. That's where we were going. Straight into its burning heart. Drones came first. Always do. Fast, erratic, endless. They move like insects, but think like predators. No patterns, no formation. Just overwhelming noise and fury. Valkyrie 4. Break left. Left. You've got 2 on your 6. I'm hit. I can't. Silence. One by one, voices started dropping off the channel. I gunned which fire between 2 spears of plasma fire and let the railgun sing. 2 drones exploded mid-roll, their pieces tumbling past my canopy like metal confetti. It was beautiful and horrifying. "Roan," came Vega's voice through the comms. Calm, clipped, like she wasn't flying through death incarnate. "We're not going to make it to the core at this rate." I checked our trajectory. She was right. The swarm was too thick. We were swatting flies with toothpicks. "I'm going in alone," I said before I could stop myself. Vega didn't argue. That's how I knew she understood. I peeled away from formation, dove hard beneath the engagement line, and slipped into the underbelly of Hive Theta. My heart was hammering so loud I thought it had burst through my ribs. No turning back now. Inside the hive, the world changed. It wasn't dark. That's what surprised me first. It was glowing, faintly, sickly, like the inside of a living thing. The walls pulsed. Organic tech fused with steel, wrapped in living cables that writhed when touched by thruster wash. The further I flew, the worse it got. I passed growth pods, row after row of them, some filled with racks and biomass, others not. Some were human. It took me a second to process it. Bodies, dozens of them, hundreds maybe, floating in green gel, faces pressed against the glass like they were still trying to scream. And one of them was Kale. He stared through me, eyelids twitching, wires drilled into the base of his skull, lights dancing across his brain case like someone had turned him into a modem. He wasn't dead, but he wasn't alive either. A conduit, a living bridge. And I realized what Hive Theta was. It wasn't a ship. It was a server, a place where minds were stored, where thoughts were formed. They weren't just fighting us. They were studying us, copying us, stealing us. I felt something brush my mind then. A whisper. "Roan, Roan." Not my name. Not really. Just the idea of me, echoed back from 1,000 versions of myself being simulated inside that hive. Let go. You don't have to burn anymore. I gritted my teeth, punched the throttle, and armed the core overload. Witchfire's reactor began to hum louder, hotter. I was going to take the whole place with me, but then I saw it. A breach, not in the hive's hull, but in its mind. A gap, a weak point. If I could plug the transmitter drive directly into the network, I could send them something. A virus, a memory, not code, not numbers, a feeling. I keyed the override, pulled up the last recording on my personal log. It was from Earth. My niece, 7 years old, blonde curls, missing 2 teeth, laughing as she chased a kite across a ruined field of glass and ash. Just laughing. I injected the memory into the spike and hit send. The effect was immediate. The hive screamed, not with sound, but with static. Every wall, every wire, Every drone around me convulsed like they'd been hit by a tsunami of something they'd never felt before. Emotion, joy, loss, love, things they dissected but never understood. I bolted out of the breach, fire licking at Witchfire's wings. Behind me, the hive began to collapse in on itself, imploding like a dying star. One down, dozens to go. But this one would remember. I rejoined Vega above the clouds. What was left of Valkyrie's squadron limped into formation beside us. The hollow sky was still there, still humming. But now, it was fractured. It had felt us, and it had bled. Roan, Vega said quietly. You all right? I didn't answer. I just stared at the stars beginning to peek through the gaps in the hive's burning wreckage. They saw us, I whispered. They felt us. She didn't ask what I meant, because deep down, she felt it too. We'd torn a hole in the void. We'd made them hurt. And somewhere, in that swirling sea of alien thought and synthetic hate, a single human memory now echoed like a weapon. A child's laugh, a broken sky, and the promise that Earth was not theirs. Not yet, not ever. Some monsters come from the stars. Others are born in the deep, and some we bring upon ourselves. The day they dropped the Leviathan into the Pacific, the ocean stopped being water. It became a wound. I was stationed in Anchorage when the sirens started. Not the sharp, blaring kind. No, this was the other kind. The global alert. The one that doesn't scream. It hums. Low, constant, bone deep. The kind of sound that doesn't warn you of danger. It just tells you you're already too late. We didn't know what it was at first. Satellite footage was patchy. Too much interference above the ring. But we saw the splash. No, not splash. Impact. Off the coast of what used to be Midway Island, something hit the ocean with enough force to trigger tectonic sensors in 5 time zones. The tsunami never came. That should have been a good sign. But nothing moving that fast. Just stops. Command pulled everyone back. Recalled every ship in range. Ordered no-fly zones across the Pacific. They thought maybe it was a weapon. Maybe a failed drop. A broken Vraxen cruiser. I volunteered to find out. Not because I was brave. Because I was angry. We took a deep-sea carrier, the Agger, straight into the kill zone. Me, Vega, 2 pilots, and a tech crew. Old rust bucket of a sub, retrofitted with a pressure-hardened hull and a rail gun mounted like a sniper rifle along its dorsal spine. We'd used it to hunt krakens once, but what we found wasn't a sea monster. It was a world ender. We hit visual range at 1,400 hours. At first, I thought it was a reef. The sonar pinged it as landmass, miles wide, miles deep. Then the reef moved, rising from the floor of the ocean like a living island. It had no eyes, no face, just a chitinous shell layered with thrumming alien glyphs, glowing faint green against the dark, limbs like continental plates, each one trailing cables and fins and half-formed wings. A biomechanical behemoth, breathing through the ocean itself. The Vraxens hadn't dropped a weapon. They dropped a god. We named it Leviathan, because what else do you call something that makes the sea run away from itself? The Agger creaked as the beast moved overhead. Lights flickered. Pressure gauges screamed. Vega's hands flew over the controls while I stood at the observation bay, staring up at the thing that shouldn't exist. Roan, she said softly, not taking her eyes off the console. What the hell are we supposed to do? I swallowed. We kill it. Her head snapped toward me like I'd lost my mind. With what? Roan? That thing's the size of New Zealand. Our rail gun would tickle it. Hell, even a nuke. We don't use a nuke. Then what? I took a breath, and I said the one word that never leaves you the same once you say it. Ride. The plan, if you can call it that, was madness. We'd surface, power up the railgun core, lure the Leviathan up from the depths, and then, as it surfaced, we'd detonate the ship beneath it. Agger had a failsafe. Every ship did. Self-destruct cores, emergency overload protocols, designed to prevent tech from falling into enemy hands. I'd read the manual in a storm shelter once. Never thought I'd actually use it. But here we were, lighting matches in a hurricane. Leviathan breached just after sundown. The water didn't part. It screamed. A tidal vortex opened around the monster as it rose, displacing cubic miles of water in seconds. The sky turned red with reflected glyph light. Our carrier shook like a paper boat in a typhoon, but we held. Because humanity doesn't kneel. We dig in. Roan, we've only got one shot, Vega said, strapping herself in beside the reactor. You're absolutely sure about this? No, I admitted, but we're out of options. She nodded. And then, quiet as a prayer, for Earth, we launched. I took the helm, locked the core, and aimed the Agger straight at the heart of the beast. Its underbelly was open, pulsing. Organic shielding parted to release sonar drones, tendrils, scanning arms. It was still waking up, still learning us. That was its mistake. We didn't give it time. The countdown started. 10 seconds. The reactor screamed. Steam vented from the walls. Every gauge hit red. 9. The sea shook like it knew what was coming. 8. My hands didn't tremble. 7. Vega's voice, calm and even. Roan, it's been a damn good ride. 6. You too, Vega. 5. I closed my eyes. 4. I saw Earth. Broken, but still breathing. 3. I heard my niece laugh. 2. I smiled. 1. Ignition. I don't remember the blast. Just the light. It didn't explode. Not really. It consumed. Turned everything into energy. Sea, steel, bone, memory. Boiled it into a single moment of blinding defiance. The Leviathan shrieked. Not with noise. With gravity. A warping, screaming wave of space-time that shattered a tectonic plate and flattened an entire island chain. And then, silence. I woke up days later, in a pod, floating, charred, alive. Vega didn't make it, but her handprint was on the core control panel. Burned in. She'd launched the pod before the final countdown hit 0. Saved me. Damn her. They found me off the coast of the ruins. A new trench had opened beneath the sea, miles deep, glowing with radiation and molten slag. Nothing came out of it. No Vraxans, no Leviathan, just ash, just silence. Command called it a tactical victory. The newsreels called it the Leviathan break. But I know what it really was. It was humanity screaming back at the dark, telling the universe we are not meat. We are not fuel. We are not prey. We are storm and steel. We are flame in the deep. We are the thing the monsters fear when they look down into the water. And we rise. There are weapons we built long ago, too powerful to use, too dangerous to forget. Sometimes, all it takes to wake them is the right kind of desperation. You could see it from orbit, a thin, golden scar stretching across the Andes, like God had drawn a line with a burning blade. We called it Solstice 1, the solar railgun, built during the first contact scare, before we even knew who or what we'd be fighting. A contingency plan so wild that even the engineers who designed it said it would never be used. Too much power, too unstable, too dangerous to aim without torching half the planet. So they buried it beneath treaties and silence, locked it down under 10 layers of political red tape, and forgot it ever existed. But war has a way of making ghosts crawl out of their graves. I was grounded when the call came. Literally, my ribs were still half healed from the Leviathan strike. Left eye covered, right leg braced. Command said I was combat deferred. Translation: useless. So I did what I always do when I'm told to sit still. I got moving. The base was deep in the mountains, buried so far beneath the rock, you couldn't even feel the wind anymore. I remember limping down that endless concrete corridor, hand brushing against the cold steel wall, the low thrum of dormant power humming beneath my boots like a sleeping giant was dreaming just below. And at the end of that corridor, standing like a ghost made of brass and spite, was the control core of Solstice 1. Still alive, still waiting. They told me what had happened. A Vraxan dreadnought, one of their Titan-class carriers, had entered lunar orbit, bigger than anything we'd seen before. It was like someone had fused a cathedral and a black hole and pointed it straight at Earth. No weak spots, no swarm, just one solid slab of extinction, humming with charged silence. It wasn't broadcasting. It wasn't deploying. It was just waiting, watching, like a loaded gun on a hair trigger. And if we didn't stop it soon, it would fire. The problem was, nothing we had could touch it. Not in time. The orbital fleet was scattered. The surviving rail guns were either slagged or too small. Even our last nuke, the real one, was under lockdown. But Solstice 1 could hit it. One shot, if we could get it to work. The railgun drew power directly from the sun. Not solar panels, not batteries. It channeled solar plasma, funneled through orbital reflectors, and condensed into a magnetic stream. Which meant 3 things. 1. It needed clear skies. 2. It needed to align with a mirror satellite last maintained a decade ago. And 3. It needed a core reactor that hadn't been tested since the last Pope wore combat armor. They brought in the techs, old ones, the kind who wore soldering burns like metals and still called machines she. They worked through the night, replaced fuses with copper wire from dead toasters, spliced cables with braided fishing line. One guy rewired the ignition sequencer using a guitar string. By dawn, the room smelled like oil, fear, and a spark of hope. And when that first capacitor lit up, glowing orange like a sunrise trapped in a jar, Someone whispered, "It's waking up," and it was. The gun itself was buried in the Andes spine, a barrel the length of a city carved into the rock. Its tip poked through the clouds, still scorched from the last time it roared. That time, it had punched a hole through a meteor the size of Manhattan. This time, we needed more. I was in the control chamber when Vega arrived. She was supposed to be dead. That's what the reports said after Leviathan. Mia, no life signs, no pod. And yet there she stood, burned, stitched, limping, alive. Of course she was. We're hard to kill. She walked in, looked around, nodded once. "This is a bad idea," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "The worst." And we got to work. We didn't have a targeting algorithm, so we had to aim by eye. Through telescope feeds, grainy space radars, and orbital drift calculations done on old calculators scavenged from schools. We tracked the dreadnought, timed its orbit, waited for the sun to line up behind the mirror satellite. It was like threading a needle with a lightning bolt. If we missed, the shot could take out a continent. The countdown started. The coil began to hum. Solstice, one hadn't spoken in years, but now it was singing. The core temperature rose like a sunrise on fire. 8,000 Kelvin. We reached ignition pressure. And still, I hesitated. Because there's something you feel, standing at the edge of a world killer. Not pride, not fear. Just wait. You realize every war you've fought, every friend you've lost, every breath you've burned, it's all led here. To one button, one shot. Vega stepped forward beside me, didn't say anything, just placed her hand over mine. And we pushed it together. The mountain shook. A scream of pure white fire ripped from the barrel and tore through the sky. Clouds vaporized in an instant. The satellite mirror caught the beam and refracted it with a precision that shouldn't have been possible. And up, across the black velvet of space, the sun fired a spear straight at the Vraxan dreadnought. I watched the feed. The beam reached it, and for one heartbeat, nothing. Then, light, too bright to be measured, too big to be described. It ate the ship, peeled it open like fruit, turned alien metal into evaporated dust. A silent inferno in the dark. And then it was gone. No explosion, no debris, just absence. The dreadnought didn't fall. It was erased. Earth watched in silence. And then, just for a moment, people cheered. From bunkers, from ships, from broken cities and shattered streets. They saw the sky clear, and they cheered, because they saw the sun fight for us. Solstice 1 burned out seconds later, cracked in half. The core collapsed. The mountain groaned and buried it again. But it didn't matter. It had done its job. The monster was dead. The message was sent. I stood outside as the dust settled, watched the stars come back, felt the weight lift, just a little. Vega leaned beside me. "That was the last shot," she said. I nodded. "I know." She turned her head. "So what now?" And I smiled. "Now we show them that wasn't our only trick. They told us Earth was the last hope. They lied. We were never their last hope. We were their first experiment." The air on Eden didn't smell like paradise. It smelled like something pretending very hard to be real. Too clean, too sweet. Like chemically engineered soil and false rain pumped through filtered clouds. Like someone built a heaven from a catalog and forgot to include the soul. They named it Eden out of irony, or maybe hope. Either way, it didn't fit. Because Eden was where humanity learned what the war was really about. The mission brief was simple. A recon op on a terraformed exoplanet previously marked as strategically insignificant. That was code 4. We ignored it too long, and now something's moving. Command sent 3 of us. Me, Vega, and Malik, a terraform return pilot who had a nervous twitch and a haunted past. Said he'd once built greenhouses on Europa and watched them burn from orbit when the war reached Saturn. He never smiled, but he flew clean, and that's what we needed. We dropped into Eden's upper atmosphere just before local sunrise. It was beautiful. Mountains so tall they pierced the stratosphere. Forests layered like artwork. Rivers running in mathematically perfect curves. It looked untouched. That was the first red flag. No world looks untouched unless something wants it that way. We landed near what used to be Unhab Zone, supposed to be a dormant agri-colony, early pre-collapse infrastructure, long since abandoned. But the buildings were still standing, clean, powered. We found a control tower with human architecture. Doors opened at our approach. Lights flickered on. Environmental systems kicked in like we were expected. There was no dust, no decay, just silence, the kind that hides teeth. Vega found the logs first. Old Earth language, encrypted under 3 layers of code. But once she cracked them open, The truth came spilling out like blood from a wound. Eden was never a backup world. It was a harvest station. Long before the first warships arrived above Earth, before the first plasma blasts scorched our skies, the Vraxans had already been here, watching, studying, testing. They didn't want to conquer us. They wanted to cultivate us. Eden was one of the places they did that. A lab in disguise. The colonists weren't settlers. They were subjects, moved here in secret under false pretense, sealed off from the rest of humanity, told they were pioneers, fed false history, false data, raised like livestock in a golden cage. Vega's voice was hollow when she said it. They didn't invade us, Roan. They grew us. We found the pins next. They didn't look like cages, more like hospitals. Rows of beds, nutrient tubes, white walls scrubbed, so clean it made your skin itch. Every bed held a person, and every person was asleep, except, not quite. Their eyes twitched, their hands spasmed, their vitals were perfect. No aging, no trauma. It was like they were paused, frozen in a moment between breaths. Malik checked the biofeeds. These people, they've been here for years, some for decades, but their bodies haven't aged a day. He looked up at me, face pale. This isn't stasis, it's containment. And then we found the worst room, a dome, half a mile wide. Inside, rows of children, floating, suspended in clear tanks, eyes open, not blinking, not seeing, just recording. Because every one of them had cables drilled into the base of their necks, feeding into a central console. And when Vega booted up the interface, we saw it. Dreams, thousands of them. Memories not just being stored, but transferred, copied, fed into something alien, something waiting. I stumbled back from the screen, bile rising in my throat. What the hell is this? I whispered. Vega's fingers were shaking as she tapped the console. It's a neural farm, she said. They're using our minds like libraries. She didn't look at me when she added the next part. They're building something with them. We didn't stay long after that. Whatever Eden was doing, it was still active. And the Vraxans knew we were there. Because that's when the sky changed. It was sudden. No alarms. No tremors. Just stillness. And then the clouds above split wide open. Not like a storm. Like a lens. Something peered through. Vast. Mechanical. Silent. A Vraxan overseer class unknown. Hovering miles above, shaped like a ring wrapped in flame, its surface covered in shifting glyphs. It didn't fire, didn't move, just watched. That was worse, because it meant we weren't a threat. We were just curious ants, wandering too close to the Queen's chamber. Malik got the ship powered while we grabbed what we could from the core. Logs, data. One of the dreaming children, unhooked, barely alive, but breathing. We burned the rest. Set charges through the labs, scorched the walls, blew the containment, not out of cruelty, out of mercy. You don't leave anyone in a place like that, not even a memory. As we lifted off, the overseer above shifted ever so slightly, just enough to remind us that it could move, just enough to say, you got lucky. Back on Earth, Command buried the files. Too dangerous, too fragile for public ears. They spun it into another scouting success. But Vega and I knew better. We'd seen the truth. The war wasn't about territory. It was about identity. They weren't fighting us to wipe us out. They were fighting to consume us, to steal the parts of us they could never make for themselves. The laughter, the rage, the music, the soul. We flew home in silence. The kind of silence you carry in your blood. Malik never flew again. The child we rescued never spoke. And Vega? She started sleeping with the lights on. Can't say I blamed her. Sometimes, late at night, I still dream of those eyes behind the glass. Not scared, just empty. And that smile. Too perfect, too made. Eden didn't burn. Not all of it. There's still a piece of it out there, waiting. And whatever it's building, it's almost finished. Space isn't quiet. That's another lie we like to tell ourselves. It hums. It breathes. And sometimes, if you listen too long, you realize it's been listening back. They told us not to go.